Hi everyone. In today's video, we're going to take a look at some advanced chromatic harmonic dictation and also really dig into identifying the function of each pitch and chord in order to more efficiently figure out what chords are being played. So let's go ahead and jump in and get started. Okay, so this is a setup for our dictation. You really only need the bass line. If you find it helpful to take the soprano, you can as well. So we're in B minor and we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 chords. Okay, so 11 chords, and we're going to use some chromatic chords in there, and we'll figure out what those are by listening to the quality of the chord and also the surrounding function of where they're falling in the progression. Okay, so this first listening, let's do 4 listenings. And on these first listenings, I want you to take your first guess at the bass, okay? And listen really carefully to where it's going, but also we're going to kind of bounce back and forth. So you're going to listen to the bass, but you're also going to listen to the quality of the chords to clue you into what those bass pitches could be. Okay, so we're going to do 4 listenings, and I'm going to do these right in a row. So if you need to pause in between listenings, go ahead and pause. And if not, just keep going with us. Okay. So first I'll give you the key. So here's your B. Let me start here. Okay. This next one, I'm going to bring out the bass a little bit more. So try and really pick out that bass line as best as you can. Okay. Now, hopefully you have a good sense. So there's probably some skips that maybe you're wondering where they are. So this time, listen for quality. If there is, you actually pause the video. I know I said I was going to do these all in a row, but pause the video. Take a look at the bass lines the bass notes that you have, and just do a quick write-in of the solfege syllables. Okay, so do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. Or remembering if there's a chromatic pitch, it's going to be fi instead of fa or d instead of do, etc. Okay, so do that and then come back, and I'm going to play just the chords. I'll play the bass, but I'm going to emphasize the chords. And so I want you to be listening for that quality. So if there's a dominant chord above a solfege other than sol, that's a big clue. Or if there's a major chord where there's usually a minor chord, that's also a big clue. Okay, hopefully you're ready. If not, pause and then come back. Okay, one more time. So now I'm going to try and play them both equally. So you're listening to, if you need the bass, you're listening for the bass. If you need to figure out kind of, you're not quite sure what the bass is and you need to grab that quality again a couple times, do that here. But get the bass nice and solid, because we're going to move on and we're going to look at the bass, and then we're going to talk about all of the information. If you feel like you don't have the bass yet, go ahead and back up and grab more listenings and then come back to here. But we're now going to look at the bass. So here we are. I'm going to zoom in a bit. Just try and keep track of where we are. So measure 1. I'll just measure these as I go. Okay, so measure 1, we leap up to Fa, and then we step down to Me. And then from there, we have this chromatic step, this half step that hopefully you were able to hear. So we go Me, Mi, Fa. Okay. 10. And then from Fa, we step down. And then we have a big leap. And here's the question of where this leap is going. But if you got that this chord, so we go Fa to back to Me. And if you heard that this chord is dominant, and there's a leap, it tells you where it has to go. So if a dominant chord leaps down, it has to be a dominant chord resolving, which means that this is an applied dominant or secondary dominant chord. So that means that it's resolving down by a fifth. Okay, so that's going down to Lay. And then we're going to go down by a third to Fa. That may have been a little bit tricky, but hopefully you heard it. And if you're thinking in terms of function, here's where the function listenings come in, because here you might start thinking that you might analyze for function and then be like, oh, wait, that note doesn't quite make sense because there's no chord that fits with function for that note. So I'm going to redo my bass. Okay, but hopefully you got this so far. So here we are with Fa. And then we get into our dominant chords. So you've got this Sol, leap up to Sol. So our cadential dominant chords. And then down to tonic with Do. So let's take a look at this. In terms of function, we start on Do, right? So when you have this kind of motion, I want you to take a minute and think through, 1, do we have tonic expansion or an alternative opening at the beginning? Do, Fa, Me. That is indicative of one certain progression. I'll let you think about that for a minute if you need to figure it out. And then here we have this chromatic step. So this is going to be a chromatic chord. This is going to be a chromatic chord. And then there's one more chromatic chord in here. So there is where the listening really comes in handy. So think about, do you have tonic expansion and alternative opening at the beginning? And then where does your predominant section start? Okay, this gets a little tricky. If you have alternative opening, the predominant tends to blur into the alternative opening tends to blur into the predominant section. So there's a lot of crossover. Here it's more clear. So hint. Okay, so think about that. I'm going to play it a couple more times, and I want you to just be thinking in terms of making an overall map for the progression. So what's going on with your opening? Where are your predominant chords? And then where does your cadence start? Which we already decided that this is your cadential dominant. So you've got Sol, Sol, Do, which could be a couple of different things. We'll talk about that in a minute. Okay, so take a listen for function and create an overall map. Again, your key. One more time for mapping. So again, tonic expansion or alternative opening, predominant chords, etc. So we have, hopefully we have tonic expansion at the beginning. The microphone here. So that's tonic expansion. And this is a very stereotypical progression of leaping up to the 5-4-2 and down to the 1-6. So that's your tonic expansion. Here we have an applied chord. The sharp is a big clue that resolves up by half step. And then here we have another applied dominant or secondary dominant. So I use those two words interchangeably, applied, secondary. And then here, so these are predominant chords. And this is our final predominant. Now, if you heard, which means that this is all of the predominant section, right? You've got those secondary applied chords as a little coloration in there. So this is our final predominant chord. And what's the quality of this chord? Okay, so if you didn't get that, think about that really carefully. The quality of this chord, and remember we're in minor. Okay, so you've got a certain quality chord on fa, which is a big clue as to what that chord is. And then, so a couple things, let's fill in what we know, first of all. So we've got a 1 chord, a 5-4-2 to a 1-6. You can basically assume, if you see do, fa, me or do, fa, mi, just assume that this is it, unless your ear is really telling you otherwise. Go ahead and assume that. And then here we have a dominant sounding chord that resolves up by half step. So that is an applied dominant to whatever has fa as its root, which is the 4. Okay, so that has to be a 5-6-5, a 4. That's your only option there. And then here we have a dominant sounding chord resolving down to a 6. So it actually has to be a 5-7, not a 5 of 6. And I'll tell you why. Well, first of all, you want to listen for that. But there's actually nothing changed in this chord. And we'll look at the whole progression at the end, but there's nothing changed in this chord. Other than the 7th scale degree. So if it was just a 5 of 6, that's actually the same spelling as a 3 chord. And in that case, it gets really goofy. And so really, you'll only have the 5-7 of 6 in minor. We could go down that rabbit hole, but we won't. Just trust me on that. Okay, so 5-7 of 6. And then here, quality of that chord, I'm going to let you think about that for one more minute. And then here, this is most likely, like 8 out of 10 times, 4 out of 5 times, it's going to be a cadential 6-4. But it could also be a 5 to a 5-7. So you want to decide which that is. Does it sound like a 5 chord with like one note being added onto it for the second chord? Or does it sound like a suspension that's resolving down, which would be the cadential 6-4. And then we're going to end on a 1. Okay, so listen, let's see if you can grab those answers in one more time. I'll give you 2 playings, but see if you can get in the first playing. Oops. Again, the key. Let's actually pause there. So sorry. So again, what I was saying about this appoggiatura in the bass with the tonic expansion, tension, resolution, incredibly common. And then we have dominant resolving to the 4, dominant resolving down to the 6, okay, to this chord. What's the quality of that? Okay, and then our 2 dominant chords. Okay, so this chord here is major, which means that it has to be the flat 2-6. That's your only major, that's your only option on fa when you have a major chord in minor. Okay? If you're in major, then it's a different story and you're thinking about a couple different things, but it's going to be a flat 2-6 here if you have a major chord in minor built on fa and it's a predominant. Okay, so then here I heard, well, I was playing it, so of course I heard it, but I heard the cadential 6/4 motion. So the only other question is this second chord a 5 or a 5/7? So do you have a 5/6/4 or a 5/6/4 to 5/3 or a 5/8/6/4 to 7/5/3? Okay, so we've got 5/6/4 at least. And then is there a 7th on this chord? Okay, so listen one more time. And kind of listen into those things that maybe you didn't get and see if you can hear what I'm talking about. So just those last 3 chords again. It's extra crunchy, so there's a 5/7. Okay, so we do have at the end 8/6/4 to 7/5/3. Okay, good. So I'm going to show you the answer now with written nicely. Okay, so here we go. And just as I was saying with that, the 5/7 of 6, it's not, the analysis isn't written ideally, but we'll work with it as it is. Okay, so here, this is that 5/7 of 6. And if it were just a 5 of 6, then it would be D, F, sharp, A, which is really just a 3 chord. Now, if you're thinking about the function, a 4 to a 3 to a 6 doesn't happen. It's not part of the chord progression chart. We're not going to get that. So it still would be considered a 5 of 6, but it's kind of misleading and tricky. And so, you know, you're really only going to get that 5/7 of 6 unless you're getting into super advanced stuff, which I'm not going to get into. You might want to talk about in the back of your brain, but hopefully any professor that's going that far is going to set you up for that. So let's look at the spelling. So here we've got the A sharp that gives us the 5/7 chord. Here we've got that D sharp, which is the third of the 5/7 of 4. And then the 5/7 of 6 resolving to the 6, and then the flat 2 right here, that C natural, that's your raw in B minor, or your lowered second scale degree. And then to the cadential 6/4 to the 1. Okay, that's it. I hope that helps. Just remember, if you think about function, it's going to help you. Like, notice how we were able to make educated guesses on pretty much the entire dictation without really having to determine, just with the bass and listening to the chord qualities. That's really all you need to be able to guess like 90% of a dictation. Educatedly guess. Okay, good. If you have any comments, questions, please reach out and let me know. And I'll see you guys later. Bye.